Right now, or maybe recently, you've probably leaned in, closed your eyes, and kissed someone. It feels like the most natural, unconscious human instinct in the world. Something we just do without thinking. But if you rewind the clock past modern romance, past medieval poetry, and way past the Roman Empire, you hit a massive historical wall. Because this deeply biological, automatic behavior wasn't always a part of us. The question is, when exactly did we figure that out? Because our relationship with kissing doesn't start with black and white cinema or some grand romantic poetry. Most of us just assume it's a cultural invention. We think someone, somewhere in the relatively recent past, just decided that pressing our faces together was a great way to show affection, and society just ran with it. It feels like a byproduct of civilization, like writing or wearing clothes. But that's not how human biology actually works. The truth is much more primal. Underneath the romance, kissing is just an incredibly intense sensory exchange. Your lips are packed with nerve endings, more than almost anywhere else on your physical body. When you lean in, you're not just performing a cultural script. You're subconsciously gathering a massive amount of chemical data. You're picking up on pheromones, tasting biological compatibility, and triggering a flood of hormones that tell your brain whether this specific person is a genuinely good genetic match or not. It's an evolutionary cheat code masked as a romantic gesture. And because it's so deeply hardwired into our physical makeup, it isn't something that just appeared out of nowhere when early humans started building cities or writing love letters. It's a primal behavior. If you look across the animal kingdom, you see variations of it everywhere. Apes literally press their lips together to make up after a fight. Other wild mammals sniff and nuzzle to build bonds. It's a survival mechanism, a way to establish trust and intimacy in a chaotic, extremely dangerous world. So, kissing didn't come after we built the modern world. It's a fundamental part of the biological machinery that helped us survive long enough to build it at all. It's older than the concept of romance itself. It's older than Shakespeare, older than the Roman emperors, and way older than the very idea of a modern relationship. We as a species have been completely wired for this exact kind of intense, invisible chemical connection for a remarkably long period of human time. But the question is, at what exact moment did we realize we wanted to do that? Rewind to Mesopotamia, about 4,500 years ago. Picture the blistering heat of the ancient Middle Eastern desert. This is the cradle of civilization. People are finally figuring out agriculture on a massive scale. They are building the very first real cities out of baked mud bricks. And they are doing something completely revolutionary. They are writing things down. They aren't using paper or ink because those do not exist yet. Instead, they are taking damp clay tablets and pressing a small, solid wooden stylus into the dirt to physically record their lives. At first, they only wrote down the incredibly boring stuff. Tax records. How much grain a local farmer owed the king. How many sheep were traded in the market. Very dry, strict bureaucratic administration. But eventually, basic human nature kicks in. Because once you invent a tool to record how much wheat you own, you eventually use that exact same tool to record how you actually feel. They started writing down grand myths, angry personal letters, and detailed stories about their daily social interactions. And hidden inside those heavy, fragile, ancient clay tablets is something genuinely unexpected. For a really long time, a lot of people just assumed that the romantic kiss might have originated much later in history, perhaps in a completely different part of the world. But a massive 2023 publication in the journal Science completely shifted that assumed timeline. Researchers managed to trace the absolute earliest documented evidence of a romantic, sexual kiss right back to this exact location and time period. About 4,500 years ago, Someone living in the ancient Middle East took a piece of wet clay and specifically documented the act of kissing. They weren't just describing a mother kissing a baby on the forehead, which is a totally different, much older survival instinct. They were specifically describing romantic, intimate, deeply personal kissing between adult partners. It was permanently carved into the physical record of early human history. Honestly, think about how wild that actually is. You are standing in the blazing desert heat, thousands of years before the Roman Colosseum was even a blueprint. Thousands of years before the first stone castles were built anywhere in Europe. The ancient world is incredibly harsh, and survival is a daily, exhausting struggle. Yet, human beings were still taking the time out of their brutal, dusty day to connect on this deeply intimate, physical level. And they thought it was genuinely important enough to physically document it all down in the mud. So when you look for the absolute origin of romantic affection, remember that this specific behavior didn't come from a movie screen. It wasn't a modern invention. It was a Mesopotamian text. But here is where the romantic illusion completely falls apart. Because when we look at those ancient records through the lens of evolutionary biology, the story suddenly changes. We like to think of kissing as this pure, ultimate expression of human connection, a beautiful mixing of souls. But medically speaking, it is basically the biological equivalent of sending a massive folder of unverified files directly into the operating system of another person. When those ancient people in Mesopotamia leaned in to lock lips, they were not just sharing affection in the desert heat. They were swapping millions of bacteria and establishing a highly efficient microscopic highway. And that brings us to the darker, much less romantic side of this discovery. According to that exact same 2023 publication in the journal Science, tracing the history of kissing also meant tracing something else entirely: pathogens. Specifically, the researchers highlighted how the rise of romantic kissing in the ancient world likely played a massive role in accelerating the transmission of viruses. The most notable one? The herpes virus. Yeah, suddenly, that beautiful moment carved into a clay tablet feels just a little bit different. Because before humans started regularly pressing their faces together, viruses had to work incredibly hard to jump from host to host. They relied on contaminated water or bad food. But then, human beings essentially invented the perfect, fast delivery system. By making deep, intimate physical contact a regular social behavior, our ancestors unintentionally built a biological superhighway for disease. Honestly, if you are a microscopic pathogen trying to survive in the ancient world, you hit the absolute jackpot. You no longer have to wait for someone to drink from the wrong river. You just wait for them to fall in love. It is a brilliant evolutionary trade-off. We craved the chemical rush, the biological data, and the emotional bonding so badly that we completely ignored the invisible risks attached to it. And the wild part is that it absolutely worked. Even with the constant threat of spreading ancient diseases, the instinct to connect was just overwhelmingly stronger. We willingly accepted the microscopic chaos because the psychological reward was too high. So, the next time you lean in for a romantic moment, just remember what you are actually doing. You are participating in a tradition of intense emotional connection, while simultaneously engaging in a high-stakes game of biological roulette. It is beautiful, it is historically profound, and it is also slightly terrifying. But that is exactly what makes the process of human evolution so incredibly fascinating. We never just invent a new way to love each other without accidentally inventing a new way to share our worst biological flaws. A primal biological instinct, an ancient clay tablet in Mesopotamia 4,500 years ago, and a brand new highway for the herpes virus. That is exactly what the researchers in that massive 2023 Science Journal publication successfully tracked for us. Kissing didn't just become a part of our global culture because it looked incredibly romantic. It is the ultimate historical proof that we have always craved profound physical connection, to the point where we willingly accepted the invisible risks right from the very dawn of early civilization. We built the first actual cities, we invented writing, and then we immediately started documenting how much we needed each other. So right now, or maybe recently, when you leaned in, closed your eyes, and kissed someone, you were not just acting out a modern script. You were unconsciously participating in a massive biological and historical loop. If you genuinely want to dig deeper into this, all the research is linked down in the description below for you to easily read.